iOS 16.2 and iOS 16.3 Beta 1 have been out for a few weeks at this point. We're in the long wait until iOS 16.3 Beta 1 is released, as well as a possible iOS 16.2.1, since there's some issues we need to talk about. Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and this is the weekly iOS update and follow-up, where we talk about battery life, the overall experience, new features that weren't found in the initial What's New video, and much more. Now, the first thing is there's some new changes, or basically bringing back, of shortcut glyphs. If we go into the Shortcuts app, and then you go into a shortcut, and on iOS 16.2 or 16.3, you'll see this. Go into the top here, and then go to Choose an Icon. Here you'll see it's reorganized a little bit, and they've brought back a bunch of glyphs, or basically added them now since we haven't had them for a while. And if you see on the left with the previous version, you'll see here on the right, if we go into the same thing here, where we choose an icon, you'll see it looks a little different. It's reorganized, and there's a lot more options. So you'll see they changed this around. There's a lot more to pick from, and there's a bunch in both of them, but there's definitely some different ones that they've brought back. And again, they've reorganized this. So it's just a small update, but something I wanted to mention. Now, with iOS 16.3 within the code, we're expecting some new updates around the world with the secure or advanced data protection. So if we go into settings and then we go to our account at the top under iCloud, you'll see here we have advanced data protection. I have this on currently on my 14 Pro Max, and this is only available in some countries, but it should be rolling out to more countries in 2023. So hopefully that comes very soon. And then with iOS 16.3, they've only brought a few features with the first beta. So I would expect a lot more in the future. They've basically brought a new splash screen for HomePod that I've shown before, and also the ability to rate a place has changed as far as the overall look of it within Maps. And this is one of my local Apple stores, and if we scroll down, you can either tap on the ratings or scroll down further to rate this place. Tap on ratings. As you can see, you can rate this overall, its products, customer service, and even add your own photos similar to that of Google Maps. And this is something that I think they're going to continue to change with maybe Beta 2 and the final release. Now, there's a new feature that's sort of an external feature that many people have wanted and works if you don't have iOS 16.2 or newer. So depending on your iOS version, you can now change the entire iOS system font. So a new font change tool that doesn't require jailbreaking was released on GitHub. And if you want to do this, you can do this with kind of a roundabout way. I won't really recommend it to most people as it's using an exploit, but if you want to change the overall system font, you can see it here. You can change the system font of everything to whatever you'd like that's included, or include your own fonts as well. Again, this uses an exploit that was patched with iOS 16.2, so it's technically a security hole, but you could do that if you were on a previous version. Otherwise, I would highly recommend upgrading to 16.2, even though you can't do this. But I just wanted to mention it as it's something I know a lot of people would love to see in iOS. Now, a lot of people have also asked me, can you downgrade from iOS 16.2 to previous versions? And unfortunately, Apple has stopped signing previous versions. So iOS 16.1.2 is no longer signed, and you can't downgrade to it anymore. So that could be a bit of an issue for some people. iOS 15.7.2 is out as well, but Apple doesn't make it easy to go back anymore unless you have previous beta versions. Then you could do that on other phones, but again, you'd have to be a developer and actually have the IPSW file to allow you to do that. So right now it's kind of difficult to downgrade. Maybe they'll make it easier in the future, but I'd love to see Apple add an update to at least let us use the last secure version of the previous iOS. Maybe in the future we'll see this, but I don't think so at this point. Now, Apple has admitted that there's an issue with iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max with horizontal screen lines flashing. I mentioned this before, but wanted to mention it again because I see more and more information about this. Basically, some people will wake their display up and then they'll have a horizontal line flash across it. I've heard more and more of you say this is a problem on your 14 Pro and Pro Max, and Apple has actually admitted that it's an issue and said it will be fixed in a future software update. that it's not related to hardware, and maybe it has something to do with the overall drivers for the display themselves. Sometimes there's different versions, different updates that they make in the factory over time, and a lot of different things can affect the overall quality or just the overall differences between the displays. So I would expect them to patch this sooner rather than later. The same is true with Apple's HomeKit. Apple Home got a major upgrade with iOS 16.2 where you could update the overall architecture of it, but then they pulled this back. And even today, there's more information about this. According to Mac Rumors, they've learned that Apple has added the Home app update to a database of both hardware and software issues internally, which is pretty rare for them. So the list, according to Mac Rumors, is used by Apple, Apple stores, and authorized service providers to include widespread issues faced by customers, including mostly hardware problems. So there could be a major issue, again, that they need to patch to bring that new architecture to all of the different home apps. So hopefully you weren't affected by this. My camera's not listed here anymore for some reason in my office. I'll probably have to re-add it. Some people have to fully delete the home and then re-add the home and everything in it. And Apple released a different article about this as well, explaining that you actually have to remove this, and if you have other issues, you may need to contact Apple support to get this fixed. So this is a major issue and why I think Apple will release iOS 16.2.1 sooner rather than later. Now, based on what we've seen in the past, I don't expect it this next week. Of course, January 1st is New Year's, and usually that week, Apple doesn't release anything. Typically, they wait for the following week. So based on what we had last year, we had iOS 15.3 Beta 2 on January 12th. So I would expect Apple to do something very, very similar that week. And then maybe release that public version as well to fix the issues with Home and hopefully the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max displays and maybe some other things as well. So that's what I would expect as far as that release, maybe in a couple weeks. Usually everyone's on vacation at this point, although Apple has changed things in the past if it's more urgent and something that's pressing. Now, based on the past as well, iOS 15.3 only had 2 betas and then a release candidate. That's because of the long span between Beta 1 and Beta 2, so we could see something very similar this year with iOS 16.3, meaning last year, we had Beta 2 on the 12th, like I said before. Then we had the release candidate on the 20th, and then a final release on the 26th. We could see something very similar this year with just a couple betas, and then a release candidate, and then a final release, with new features, some small bug patches, and more. So Apple could wait until those dates in order to fix the issues with the Home app, as well as the 14 and 14 Pro Max issues, or they could push a separate update. Let me know what you think in the comments below, but I would expect them to push a smaller update first, and then of course we'll have those advanced security protection updates as well, meaning that they'll push those rapid response updates with different patches for just security loopholes. Now, one other thing that could explain some of the issues we've had with the 14 Pro and Pro Max could be due to the overall chipset that's inside. Apparently, Apple was working on really bumping up the power of the GPU this year, supporting ray tracing similar to recent high-end graphic cards like the RTX 3080 and 4080 and the latest series, but they changed this as battery drain was too great. So Apple actually changed their mind, kind of moved some of the management around, and they didn't bump up the power like we thought they would year over year. So maybe that's why the A16 Bionic isn't huge leaps above A15. But either way, hopefully we'll see some of those ray tracing graphic powers in the future updates. So that's something I would like to see, something I have on a computer with Windows playing games. I'd love to see it on iOS with iPad and Mac and more. Now, as far as bugs and things that still remain in iOS, well, there's quite a few, and of course we know about some of them, but I keep hearing more and more reports about Apple CarPlay, with lots of things with it rebooting, causing the phone to reboot, just lagging, or just not working or connecting altogether. I've heard more and more of you say that you're having issues with this, and I'm not sure if it's specific to a different type of car, whether it's Honda, Toyota, Mercedes, BMW, pretty much most manufacturers have that now. So if people are having that, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below and what type of vehicle you have, or if it's an aftermarket one, if it's Pioneer or something like that. Now, AirPods continue to report 0 for the case itself. Now, whether or not this is an iOS issue or maybe a firmware issue with the AirPods is hard to say. You'll see it's reporting battery here in the little pop-up once you connect them, but once they're in use, Typically in your battery widget, you'll have a little battery widget explaining what's going on, and many people just show it as 0, meaning that the case isn't reporting that it's charged or not. So again, I'm not sure if this is an iOS bug or something related to the AirPods case, but it needs to be patched either way. Now there is still that swipe home bug. If you're playing music, I'm seeing that still, and it seems to come and go. So it's not here right now. Sometimes it shows up, sometimes it doesn't. But again, if I swipe home, it's nice and smooth there, press and hold, it's working fine. But again, sometimes it just seems to not work properly. So it's a little stuttery here and there, and maybe again it has something to do with that graphics chip that Apple planned to include but never did. So they had to maybe update the drivers and change a lot of things that took them a long time, and it's taking them a little bit to get it super smooth. But either way, it keeps coming back and a reboot fixes it. Also, one thing I keep hearing that I thought was specific to me because of the different devices I'm always switching between for these videos is a lot of people keep getting asked for their iCloud password. I see this on a lot of different devices all the time. I have to sign in before making these videos almost every single time. Now that could be due to the amount of devices, or it could just be due to some odd bug. However, I'm hearing this more and more, and I thought it was just me, but you'll see the devices I have here. Oftentimes I'll boot some up that haven't been on for a little while, such as the 11 Pro Max, and then it will ask me for the password again, over and over and over. So let me know if you're having that issue. Now, one thing I wanted to mention is in previous videos, I mentioned how location is always here at the top. Unfortunately, the Tesla app requires that to use it as a key, and I'm seeing that reported a lot of the time. So you'll see weather and system services is reporting that. However, I did find an app that was causing battery drain and even using it after I uninstalled it. So another electric car maker, Rivian, I actually had their app installed. I uninstalled it and it still showed that it was using location even after it was uninstalled. I did a hard reboot and that fixed it. So that was an odd bug that was built into iOS, and even uninstalling the app didn't fix it. It took that reboot to fix the issue. So if you're having issues, try and reboot and maybe it will fix battery life. Additionally, I've heard some people say they're still having issues with storage. I haven't heard really anybody say that it's taking up too much storage to the point where you can't install anything, but people have just been saying that they think system storage is too great. But again, I've mentioned in the past that that's actually cache and it will vary all the time. So we'll wait for this to load a moment. You'll see at the bottom I have 25.87 gigabytes used. This is okay as it's cache files typically. You'll see it says system data includes caches, logs, and other resources currently in use by the system. This value will fluctuate according to system needs. So as needed, it goes up and down, and it should leave you with enough storage to use your different apps and the data required for those. It should shrink on its own, so typically I wouldn't worry too much about it. Now, as far as overall performance, well, performance really hasn't changed at all. Whether that's an older version or a newer version, it seems to be the same. So just using it is super smooth, especially on ProMotion. I haven't really had any issues there, just scrolling. It seems to be nice and smooth, and haven't really noticed any problems there. However, that swipe home bug and lag is what I've seen before. Just over time, maybe over a week or so, then I have to restart the phone and it fixes the issue. So there's definitely some weird bugs there, maybe a memory leak that's causing that, but typically I don't run into that too much. As far as the overall benchmarks, well, let's go ahead and run that. We'll go into it. I haven't run it for a few days. Let's just go into it now and see what we get. After running benchmarks just really quickly, I have 1,869 for single core, 5,350 for multi-core. If we go into the history, you'll see here, back in December 3rd, we'll have to find where we have the most recent here. There's December 23rd, so we're actually a little bit higher for single core, so 1,869 versus 1,861, and multi-core is much higher at 5,350 versus 4,838. So it typically increases over time as all the background processing has completed, and as long as you're not doing any heavy intensive tasks when you're running it, it seems like it's doing quite well. No issues there. It's faster than ever as far as that goes. And since we just ran Geekbench, I thought we'd share the heat of the phone. As you can see, as I bring this over the hottest part of the phone, we're about 86 to 87 degrees Fahrenheit. If we switch to Celsius, you'll see over the same area about 31 degrees Celsius. So maybe 31.2 is the highest I've seen there. So it's staying pretty cool in general. Even after running that benchmark, it's quite cool. It's cooling down quickly. Now, as far as overall battery life, now that we have a couple weeks of using it regularly, I wanted to share that with you. And let's go into settings, and then we'll go to battery health. This phone's down to 99%, and you can see the overall cycle count from Coconut Battery. It's an app that's on the Mac. It's not through the App Store. It's just, you can search for it and download it. It's a free app. And let's take a look at the overall battery life. Yesterday, I only used it for 2 hours and 17 minutes with screen active time, 2 hours and 18 minutes of screen idle time, and used about 50% of the battery. It hasn't been great for me, and it really hasn't been great ever for me. Maybe it's some apps I have on the phone, but you'll see here the best day as far as the most usage was 4 hours and 35 minutes of screen active time, and I used a little over 75% of the battery. So again, it hasn't been great for me. Other people have different experiences. Now on YouTube, a couple of hours ago, I ran a poll asking, with iOS 16.2, has battery life improved for you now that it's been out a couple weeks? And then please comment as to what version you upgraded from and what phone you're using. Only 42% said that it has better battery life than the previous versions. 58% said no, but that means it could be the same. So let's go ahead and take a look at the comments. There's already 202 comments, and you'll see the first one here that popped up is 14 Pro Max. All works good here. Been keen on updating whenever new versions come out. 16.2 seems to be solid aside from the AirPod case bug. And that's what I mentioned earlier. We'll just choose randomly here. And I use a 13 mini. I wouldn't say it changed for me given the day or so after updating. My iPad 8 though feels brand new speed-wise, and the battery is noticeably better. So that's a good sign. Some people have different experiences than others depending on what apps they're using and much more. You'll see someone else said 16.2 bricked my 8 Plus and made all of my Apple TV movies and shows disappear in my 11. And that's the first time I've heard that. That's pretty poor, and that you'd have to restart all of that and add all of that back. Hopefully it's fixed. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. And we'll take a look at one more, as it's very subjective, again, depending on what you're using. You'll see someone here says 10R, same as before, and then the person below says, however, in iPhone 12 models, there are no issues at all. According to my country, Sri Lanka, there is major issues with iPhone 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max, some display issues after updating. Now, I haven't heard of any recent display issues after updating. I heard that with some previous versions, but I, again, would love to hear from you below if you're having issues with your phone display. Earlier on, I did hear about some people having that issue. And so as we wait for the next version, whether that's iOS 16.2.1 or iOS 16.3, we'll continue to do these follow-ups, especially if we find more features and more. But of course, I would expect many more features with 16.3. And then of course, iOS 17 is where we'll see major updates. It's hard to believe it's only about 6 months away. I did a video the other day talking about what I'd like to see and what many of you have asked to see in the next version of iOS. Hopefully we get some sort of redesign, and stability is the number one thing I want this year. The features are fine. There's not a whole lot more that I want it to do, maybe other than split screen and things like that many people want. I want better stability overall with consistent and regular battery life. Maybe even a better way to view that. But let me know your ideas for iOS 17 in the comments below, and let me know if you have any other things you'd like to see in these videos as well. I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.